There's a fish. Oh, he's back. Got him.
Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked Fly Fly Fishing. And today let's look at using a 9-foot spinning rod instead of a shorter rod for river bass. Now, if you've seen the video I did recently of me fishing a fly using a bullet weight on a 7.5-foot light steelhead rod, you'll have heard in that video me referring to how it might be nicer to have a 9-foot rod. So I went back to the same water with a 9-foot light steelhead rod and gave it a try. That's the G. Loomis IMX light 9-footer. It casts 1/4 to 1.5 ounce, and it's considered a moderate action. So I thought, this would be a cool rod to try instead of your standard 7.5 foot rod. Now you're going to say, why? Like everybody fishes 7-foot rods. Why do I need something that much longer? Well, when you think of how we normally use a rod in that range, we're fishing off of boats, we're fishing off of shore, we're fishing with people all around us, we're fishing off of piers, all this kind of stuff. And the short rod works great. And short rods are quite accurate. So if I was working off of a boat, casting 40, 50 feet and casting very accurately, boy, I want a short rod. I don't want a long one. The accuracy is important. Also, short rods are also good for leverage, pulling big bass out of the cabbage. It works great. But when you're wading out in the middle of a river, it's a different scenario. There, when you're, especially if you're wading deep, waist deep, for example, having a 9-foot rod is fantastic. And, me being a fly fisher, 9-foot rods, for me, they're short. I got one rod that's 15 foot, so a 9-foot rod for me is normal. I'm not afraid to go out there with a 9-foot spinning rod. So it worked like a charm for me. And I've got some clips. We'll take a look at them, and you can see how it helped me do a number of things. First off, when it came to casting far, even though the rig was light for the rod, I was able to get excellent distance with it and cover some long runs. So I had no trouble doing that. Now, what's even more important is I have to manage the depth I'm running my rig at, because the river varies. It goes shallow and deep and shallow and deep and fast and slow currents. And you have to be able to manage that. And in my other video, you saw me doing that with a 7.5-foot rod. Well, it gets even easier with a 9-foot rod. I can lift my rod up and bring it up off of bottom if I'm starting to touch bottom, or if I'm getting into deeper water, I can drop the rod tip way down, and now that bullet weight will sink and bring the fly or the soft plastic down in the current. If I'm casting a cross current and I want to reorient it so it's more facing upstream than across stream, these are all different things you can do with a longer rod, which becomes more difficult with a shorter one. Also, steelheaders use these long rods for a reason. They want to keep the line off the water. And when I'm keeping the line off the water, I can feel every time that bullet weight touches bottom, just tuk, tuk, I can feel it. I know if I'm getting a little too low. It's a great advantage to be able to keep your line clear of the water. It gives me lots of options in how I manage depth and how I feel what's going on. Now, as far as the reel and the line are concerned, I'm using a 4000 sustain and with yellow high-vis Power Pro. And part of that reason for that is, first, I like 4,000 reels for big rods, a 9-foot rod. A lot of people would use a 3,000, but for me, I like the size of the reel. I like the capacity of the reel. The big spool gives me extra distance. But the other part of that is the yellow, that yellow Power Pro, high-vis yellow. I'm able to track that line around across the water. I can see it clearly against the water, and it helps me figure out where the line is, what's going on. I actually detected one of the takes before I felt it. I saw the line move, and then I felt it. And it's that kind of visual clues that you get out of the bright line really helps. So having the ability to keep the line off the water enables me to see that Power Pro all the way down to where it touches the water and enters the water, and I can see a lot of what's going on. Now, also when you get into trying to fight fish, for example, one of the problems I have is my local river requires barbless hooks in a lot of sections, and I like using barbless anyway because they come out of the fish easier and they come out of me easier. But it's very easy to lose bass on the jump. And if your rod is on the stiff side and a bass jumps, it's hard to keep the pressure on them and not basically bounce them off. Because if you're using a stiff rod, and you really reef it, you can actually bounce the bass right off. That long rod has a more moderate action, and what I found is when the bass were jumping, I could apply pressure, and they didn't come off on the jump. It was very cool. I mean, they stayed on. I think I lost one in total on the jump the whole day. So it was quite effective at keeping the fish on with a barbless hook. And it's that long, moderate action. There's a lot of shock absorbing in there. But it still has the backbone when you want to set a hook. That's not a problem. You can do that. But that soft, moderate action, it's that shock absorbing that you get. And you can also run lighter line if you want to as well, because you can't put the pressure on the fish, or the fish can't snap you off that easily because of that moderate, long rod. It's really, really just like fishing a fly rod, a 9-foot fly rod. I feel like I've got a 9-foot 4-weight out there. It's got that same kind of feel. And so it gives me that kind of shock absorbing action that, keeps fish buttoned up. And the last thing I want to say is that when you're wading deep and you're using a long rig like I have, I mean, from the Power Pro down to the hook is about 4 feet. I've got to keep that all off the water when I'm casting. And if I'm wading waist deep and I got a 7-foot rod and I've got 4 foot hanging off the end and I got to make a cast, what happens? I dump everything into the water behind me. With a 9-foot rod, I can keep it all off the water. And also when you're wading deep, the other problem you get into is the deeper you go, it starts dropping off your distance a little bit. And with that longer rod, I can keep going and keep that everything way up in the air. I can still keep contact. I can still lift line. I've got that extra length, allow me to manage everything even though I'm waist deep in water. So it gives me advantages when wading that you don't get with a shorter rod. So give that some thought. If you want to chase river bass and you want to get in the river and you want to wade for them, and you have a steelhead rod in the basement that you've put away until steelhead season, well, pull it out. If you've got a steelhead spinning rod, use it. It's great for river bass. It gives you a lot of flexibility, and they're very effective fishing tools, and you'll enjoy the casting distance. Cheers.
What I like is with a light steelhead rod, even these modest sized bass are fun when they've got some current to work with.